The old town lay forgotten, shrouded in mist and silence. A lone wanderer stumbled upon its ruins, his name lost to time. He was drawn by a flicker of light in the distance, a faint glow emanating from a crumbling tower. He cautiously navigated the overgrown paths and crumbling archways. Each step was a whisper in the stillness. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and curiosity. As he neared the tower, the light grew stronger. He found a lantern hanging from a rusty hook. Its glass was cold, its metal ornate. This was no ordinary lantern. He could feel a strange energy emanating from it. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold metal. He felt a jolt, a surge of energy. The lantern flickered to life, bathing the tower in an eerie green light. The air grew heavy, filled with the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and unworldly. The light from the lantern pulsed. The shadows in the tower danced. The wanderer felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Then he heard them, whispers, soft and mournful. They seemed to seep from the very stones of the tower. He turned, his eyes wide with fear and fascination. The whispers grew louder, taking shape in the swirling mist that now filled the tower. Shapes began to form, shimmering figures that seemed to coalesce from the shadows. He recognized them. The townsfolk. They were the long-dead residents of this forgotten place, their forms translucent and shimmering under the lantern's eerie glow. Their eyes, filled with a mixture of sadness and accusation, were fixed on him. The wanderer stood frozen, caught between the world of the living and that of the dead. He was both terrified and strangely compelled. He had awakened something powerful and potentially dangerous. The first spirit to step forward was a burly man with hands like iron. He wore a leather apron and his face was etched with the grime of the forge. The air around him crackled with the heat of his trade, the memory of it clinging to his spectral form. "I was betrayed," the blacksmith rasped, his voice a low groan that echoed through the tower. "Murdered for my craft, my legacy stolen." He raised a spectral hand, pointing a finger at the wanderer. The wanderer recoiled, but the blacksmith's touch passed through him. He felt a chill, however, a deep, bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep into his very soul. He realized that these spirits weren't here to harm him. Not physically, at least. They were here to tell their stories, to share the burdens of their past. The lantern, he understood, was a conduit, a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The next spirit to emerge was an old woman. She clutched a mortar and pestle in her hands, her spectral form surrounded by the scent of herbs and strange concoctions. Her eyes, though filled with sadness, were sharp, as if she could see into the wanderer's very soul. "My knowledge was misused," she whispered, her voice a dry rustle like autumn leaves. "My cures twisted into poisons, my good intentions warped into something dark." Her gaze seemed to pierce the wanderer, judging him. He felt a pang of sympathy for these spirits. They were trapped, bound to this place by their unresolved pasts. The lantern, he realized, was not just a beacon, but a prison. He was both their liberator and their captor. He felt a sense of responsibility. He had awakened these souls, and he was drawn to their stories, to the secrets they held. He couldn't just abandon them, he had to see this through. Section 5. The Lover's Vow. A young couple materialized before him, their hands clasped together even in death. Their faces, though etched with the pain of their final moments, were filled with a love that transcended even the grave. "We were torn apart," the young woman cried, her voice a mournful whisper, "our love forbidden, our future stolen." The young man stepped forward, his eyes filled with a desperate longing. "Promise us," he pleaded, his voice echoing through the tower. "Promise us you'll find the truth." The wanderer found himself nodding. his heart heavy with their sorrow. He was drawn deeper into the mystery of this forgotten town, compelled to unravel the truth behind their tragic fates. Section 6. The Mayor's Confession. The air grew heavy, the shadows in the tower seeming to press in as the final spirit appeared. He was a tall, imposing man, dressed in fine clothes, but his face was contorted in a mask of fear and guilt. This was the town's former leader, the one with the most to hide. "It was I," he choked out, his voice ragged and filled with self-loathing. "I orchestrated their deaths. Driven by greed, by power, I sacrificed them all." His spectral form trembled, consumed by the weight of his sins. The wanderer listened, his heart pounding in his chest. The mayor's confession was a revelation, a key to unlocking the secrets of this cursed town. He finally understood the depth of the tragedy that had unfolded within these walls. Section 7. The Lantern's Price. The spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving back into the mist. The lantern's light flickered, as if struggling to maintain its hold on them. The wanderer felt a pang of sadness, a sense of loss as they disappeared. He understood now. The lantern wasn't just a tool for summoning the dead, it was a vessel for their pain, their regrets, their unresolved emotions. By giving voice to their stories, he had offered them a temporary reprieve, a moment of peace. But there was a price to be paid for this knowledge, for the power he now wielded. The lantern had awakened something within him, a darkness that mirrored the secrets he had uncovered. Section 8. The Weight of Truth. The wanderer stood alone in the tower, the lantern's eerie green light casting long, dancing shadows. He now carried the weight of the town's tragic history, the burden of its secrets. He could no longer claim ignorance, could no longer turn away from the darkness he had unearthed. He knew he had a choice to make. He could extinguish the lantern, try to forget what he had seen and heard, or he could embrace the power it offered, the ability to shed light on the hidden truths of the world. Section 9. A Flickering Conscience. He looked down at the lantern in his hands, its metal warm to the touch. He felt the pull of its power, the allure of its magic, but he also felt a growing unease, a sense of foreboding. He knew that the lantern was a double-edged sword. It could be used for good, to right wrongs, to expose secrets that deserved to be revealed. But it could also be used for selfish reasons, for personal gain, for vengeance. The choice was his. He could become a beacon of hope, a seeker of truth, or he could succumb to the darkness, becoming a puppet to the lantern's power. Section 10. Echoes in the Mist. The wanderer stepped out of the tower, the lantern held aloft. The mist swirled around him, but it no longer seemed cold and oppressive. It felt charged with energy, with possibility. He could still hear the whispers of the dead, but they no longer filled him with dread. They were a reminder of his purpose, of the burden he now carried. He was the keeper of their stories, the guardian of their memories. He would use the lantern's power wisely to honor their suffering, to ensure that their deaths had not been in vain. He set off into the mist, his silhouette receding into the distance, the lantern's light a lone beacon against the encroaching darkness. He didn't know where his path would lead, but he knew one thing for sure: he would never be the same. He had glimpsed the other side, the realm of the dead, and it had changed him forever.